And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm Jeffrey David Hartford. This is Coach's Corner. COACH, for those of you that are new here, is an acronym I came up with that stands for Conduit of Optimism, Altruism, Consciousness, and Health. And with that in mind, I always try to bring you information and, like today, a guest that can add to those topics. And today's guest is going to absolutely add to each one of those topics. This is somebody that I had the privilege of meeting back in December of 21 at the Wim Hof Method seminar I went to that he hosted. And I was absolutely blown away. I could tell right off the bat that he and I were cut from the same cloth. His energy was something that I needed to be around more. We actually chatted briefly and talked about the potential idea of doing some sort of a retreat or something together, which we have yet to do, but we will talk a little more about that today as well. I'll throw him on the spot. And without further ado, our guest today is Michael Christoforo. And Michael, real quick, I'll say it from my perspective before I throw it to you to hear it from you. But as I already mentioned, Wim Hof Method, Michael's certified in that and does a brilliant job of delivering that information. He's also studied under Patrick McKweon and the Oxygen Advantage Method, as well as XPT, which stands for Extreme Performance Training. And that was under Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese. So, Michael, with that, I kind of want to throw to you, get the superhero origin story, if you will. What got you into all this? What made you so interested in learning how to breathe and all these different methods of how to do it?
Your words are so kind. I thank you. I hope there's a recording of this so I can play it back every time I'm feeling down. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah, I guess the origin of like the breath. I've always been intrigued by it or with it, and not fully understanding when it was happening when I was younger. I guess I started yoga at an earlier age when I was in my teens, and we would always end with some kind of breath work. This teacher that I would go to. And I didn't fully understand what was going on, but I knew how I felt. And, I always believed in that. I always believed in intuition and, kind of just the path guiding you in terms of how you're feeling. And not to say that stress or trials aren't important. I'm not saying that at all. But your intuition when it speaks to you, and it's like, it drives you on a path. So I always knew that there was a lot more to this thing that we do all of the time than I had learned or knew at that point. So I wanted to dive deeper into it. And, fast forward years later of doing different kinds of, pranayama work, for just different kinds of kundalini, whatever, I could get my hands on really, I would try. And I, maybe like 7 years ago at this point or so, a good buddy of mine, this could be longer actually, a good buddy of mine was like, hey man, here's this dude that's, he's kind of crazy, but you're kind of crazy. And I really think you're going to like him. And I was like, all right, cool. Send me a link, whatever. So I ignored it a little bit. And then I opened it up and here's this guy, Wim Hof, that I'd heard like a little bit about before, just in like inner circles of doing crazy stunts that were superhuman type thing, So on that level, I was intrigued, but then I was like, here's my buddy he's not in that world at all. So what's going on? So I started, really seeing everywhere I looked, Wim would pop up. I love Rhonda Patrick. I follow her a lot. Wim did a lot of stuff with her. I would listen. This is a decade or so ago, more religiously than now. But he was with Tim Ferriss. He was with Joe Rogan. He was with a lot of these people that I really looked to, for health advice and things like that, and kind of tips and tricks and routines. And then I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try the breath. I'll try one round of his Wim Hof breathing. I didn't know anything more than, in college about ice baths and suffering through them to heal, sports injuries and stuff like that in the tubs down at Dub V. But I did the breath, and in 3 minutes, it catapulted me to a place that had taken me like a decade plus of meditation and other kinds of breath work, like to even touch, and I was like, oh my God, I'm holding my breath and I feel like I'm floating. You know what I mean? I feel this vastness. I feel this stress just release. And the feeling was what captivated me. And Wim's whole thing is feeling is believing. And I was like, man, this guy is onto more than I think what meets the eye, and all these, stunts or I guess records, Guinness World Records that he was doing at the time. There's a lot more to it than just this little thing. I want to dive deeper into it more. I want to meet this guy. I want to feel his energy and his presence, and, kind of get into that world. And the more that I did, the more I just not only like fell in love, with how I was feeling, but with Wim. Like that guy is just a force. You're around him and you're magnetized. You feel uplifted and like empowered. Like you feel that inner power that you want to, dive deeper into and share and spread. And, there were some things that I witnessed that I was in person with, that I saw him do, that I was, it went beyond it went beyond like all of the feats and everything, down to the human and the way that he treated people. And I saw how people transformed in front of him and then carried that on. And one of the things that I love about the Wim Hof method is it's repeatable. You know what I mean? You can do it yourself and have a consistent practice. A lot of times when you go to retreats, a lot of times when you go to, even to like workshops or that of the sort, it's like you're there for that amount of time and you have this incredible experience for this amount of time. And then what? You know what I mean? Like, how do you integrate that into your life? How do you use that as a practice to continue to get to that elevated state, to dig deeper into yourself, whether that's through your traumas or your stresses, or to find, what it is that you're good at, that you want to share with people. There's more space for that. So, with Wim, I was like, man, that the human in that guy was beyond words, beyond measure. And that's really what encapsulated me with him. And I met his family too a few times early on and fell in love with them, and just seeing their whole dynamic and how he's a human being. And that's the thing. He's doing all of these incredible stunts. And Wim is one of those mixes of like, yes, he absolutely had, I'm talking in terms of athletics. You have people that have God-given talent and ability. Then you have people that are workhorses that like really grind and know how to do that. And then you have people that have a combo of all of those, that have like the mind, body, spirit connection where everything excels. Like that's kind of Wim to me. He can do these incredible feats in terms of like the physical and in terms of what his body is capable of doing, but his also mind and his spirit are just, they're there too, So Wim is a force, that's for sure. He to me represents some of the potentials in human.
Amen. Yeah, I love everything about that. And it's interesting as you're talking about that, I had two things hit me. The first one is, as I'm sitting here watching you talking to me, I just kind of got lost. I feel like I'm watching somebody else's podcast and I'm sitting here as the observer. So thanks so much for what you bring to this. That's amazing.
Thank you.
It's interesting. You mentioned kind of jokingly that when your friend introduced you, if you will, to Wim, he said he's your kind of crazy. And that's interesting. That's kind of telling to me, because when I met you, the title of this podcast is, the C is conduit. You were a conduit for me to Wim. And maybe, I think that speaks to the power of Wim, but it also speaks to what you bring to the table as well, that this wasn't just, hey, Wim's popular, he's doing well, maybe I'll get his certification and go make some money selling this program. It wasn't that at all with you. I felt like we had Wim's energy there with us through you. It was really wild, and I'm super grateful for that. And it's interesting, you said it's repeatable, and it definitively is. I had the opportunity to follow some of his stuff that he's got on YouTube, going through that on my own. And that in and of itself was really powerful, just doing that, even the beginner ones by myself. But I have to say, doing it at the workshop with you in a room with other people around, I was picking up on the energy of the people in the room. I kept thinking about it. I'm like, at some point I'm going to talk to people about this. How would I explain it? And the energy I felt was that there was just this love emanating through the room. And then when we did the breath work, and I didn't know in the moment how long it was, but I knew it wasn't just a round or two. We wound up doing it for 45 minutes. And the word that kept going through my mind as I was thinking to myself, how would I describe this, was electric. I mean, I felt like I had electricity running through my arms, down my fingertips, through my legs, through my toes. And interestingly, reading Wim's book, the first time he said when he was getting himself exposed to the cold, I think he was 17 at the time, and he just intuitively took 25 of those breaths. And he said he felt electricity. I'm like, whoa, that's it. He got something from this and was able to put it together in such a way that, as you said, it's repeatable, which is unbelievable. I mean, that just speaks to him that he's not just as some people, kind of roll their eyes when they hear about his feats. He's just a freak of nature. He's one of a kind. He's an anomaly. I mean, in some ways he is, right? Of course he's one of a kind. But, as he says, he goes, I'm not special. I'm trained. And he created this system that now allows people such as yourself to go around and train other people as well. So I guess my question with all that, first of all, I don't think I can express my gratitude for you and Wim enough. So thanks so much. But maybe you can, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Maybe you can shine a little bit of light on what do you think it is, or maybe that electricity is from the breath work.
Well, I mean, if you want to go down to a cellular level, you're producing more energy. You're producing more mitochondria. You're strengthening your mitochondria. You're producing more adenosine triphosphate, which is energy within the body itself. And so down to a biochemical level, yeah, you're absolutely doing that. You're also raising your adrenaline by doing the breath work. It's a form of hormesis. This is where I was kind of rambling to. My wife, she'll be like, "Hey, Ronnie," calls me Ronnie the Rambler. Sometimes she'll be like, "Wrap it up, let's go." You get to the point. So if I ramble. My apologies. But what's so adrenaline's being released. That's for sure. But I feel too, and again, like, this might be woo-woo. I like to say, in terms of like Wim Hof, one of the things I love about him is he brings the woo-woo to reality through science, where it's like, there is this spiritual element and there's also a physical element. And what is actually happening down on a physiological level, down to a cellular level, like that stuff's important, I feel, to know. One, so it's not a mystery where you're just like, pun intended, at the whim of whatever it is that you're doing, but you actually have some control over it, and you have that knowledge of feeling. That's really important. It's really important to tap into that, because the more we can tap into that, the more we tap into our intuition, and we become stronger for it. But I also believe that there's like a real spiritual element that you are able to kind of de-stress and activate. If you believe in Joe Dispenza and what he's doing in terms of, brainwave activation, you can measure that stuff and see how your brainwave frequency alters. So, I mean, you're in a higher altered state, the chemistry within is in a different state. So I feel that you're able to channel more of that energy because there's less weighing you down. I feel that you're able to tap into that source that's within much more optimally than before, because you don't have all this clutter around, So, I mean, there are a few things going on, but in terms of the physical, or the chemical, the biochemical, and within the body, that's what's happening in mitochondria, adenosine triphosphate. You're lessening inflammation, you're raising your adrenaline level, and also on a mental, spiritual plane, I feel that you're able to activate more and commune more with your higher self, with your more spiritual self. And that in of itself is life-giving. It's really energizing.
Oh, it's brilliant. And it's interesting you bring up Dr. Dispenza. I love everything he stands for. And it's funny, man, over the years, being introduced to different people now, such as yourself in person, but people like Wim and Dr. Dispenza through books and or podcasts, we're just taking bits and pieces that they are some of the people that have led to this concept of me being a conduit. And I want to share all that type of information with everybody that I possibly can. And that really led to the whole idea of this podcast. So I'm glad you brought him up as well. So from that cellular level, the chemical level, you're absolutely right in terms of where that electricity comes from. But it's interesting. There's the spirituality is something that means more to me now than it would have in the past. And that's just through firsthand experience, meditation, experiencing some things that I never quite thought or dreamt possible. I've now lived it. And, it's wild what that does. It leads me to—
How has it changed you?
I think the simplest thing, it's in many, many ways it's changed me, but the simplest thing is it made me recognize how much of an egoic state I was living in not realizing it whatsoever. I remember back to, this was teenage years. So this is going through puberty and such, which is a pretty common time for this to happen. But people would tell me that I had an ego. And, at the time, I would get defensive. I didn't even understand quite what the word meant, but interesting that to get defensive when somebody tells you that you're being egocentric, you're kind of proving the point. If you're not living in an ego-driven way, then somebody can say that to you and you don't really feel it. It doesn't impact you all that much, but it's given me the opportunity to, look within. And, interesting. I'm glad you asked that question, because I was going to say, what that did for me is seemingly what the cold did for Wim, and that's find a sense of purpose, right? It's allowed me to discover so much about myself and make some changes. The breath work, the cold exposure, the meditations being some of many that have really opened doors for me and changed my life, that I just feel obligated to share. I want people to feel what I've felt and experience what I've experienced. So do you feel now with all the breath work, I know you're a breath work coach, a meditation coach. Do you feel is it safe to say that that's part of your purpose, or what do you feel you've done to discover your sense of purpose, and what do you feel it is?
I don't know. I don't. I can say that I feel that I have found my purpose. But who knows? That might change in 10 years. I don't know. What I do know is that this really helps people, and it's helped me. And it's nothing that I created, but it is something that I have used and now teach as a tool for optimization. I think what you're talking about, we always end, you've heard this before, but I'll repeat it, but we always end, either our retreats or our workshops, and just this idea that we all have it's crude, but I'm from Boston, so fuck it, right? But we all have this, we have this bucket of shit within us, and that's our stresses, our traumas. It's, our pathologies of what we've been through that lead us to whatever thought pattern that we have today, and so on and so forth. And I think the good practices, whether that be an ice bath, whether that be going to the gym, whether that be breath work, yoga, earthing going on, is it allows you to go through that, because what you're going to find at the bottom of that to keep going through that is love. It's self-love. You're going to forgive. You're going to be able to make more room for compassion. You're going to feel lighter, and then you spread that to each other. You know what I'm saying? And people feel that. Yeah. When you change, the reason I was asking, how is that changing? And whatever, when you change, people change around you. Yeah. The more vulnerable, let's say, just use vulnerability for an example, but you can say that to any attribute that you are, and confident in that. And it's okay that we're going through this, and it's not the easiest thing, and you can't be suave all the time. It's the more that you're able to go through that and share that, with wisely chosen people, the more they're going to do that to you or for you and open up more. And the more you're going to share that and express that, and the stronger you grow. Mm-hmm. I think we all have that duty to go through that bucket and to find that. I really feel that there's a lot of humanity that is untapped, especially right now, that we can be getting in an ice bath or breathing our way into some kind of in our understanding. But I would say that getting back to your question about purpose, I don't know. Maybe it's my purpose. Maybe it's one of my purposes. Sure. This is what I know, and I know through trial and error that it is something that I'm good at, and that it helps people, and those two things are fantastic together. So that's where I am. I'm whatever I can do to help someone's journey and to empower them so they can, or help empower them, or add a tool to their toolkit so they can empower them, whatever it is. I just want to, I want to add to the good. I want to make people feel stronger And if they find purpose in that, then great. But just to feel stronger and better about themselves, because ultimately what we really want is to treat each other better, or to treat each other with respect, kindness, and love. And the more you can do that internally, the more you can do that externally. And ultimately, I think that's what I'm getting at. That might be the purpose. I even look back at, like, when I first moved to New York, I was obsessed with comedy. I went through comedy schools for like 10 plus years. I went through all the improv schools and everything. And I just wanted to share laughter. I wanted to like make people feel good. And, this might be a part of that whole thing. It's just, you want to, I don't know, add light to it.
Absolutely. That's awesome. It's interesting what our backstories are and what bring us into it, right? And it's really funny too that you say you're from Boston. I'm from New Hampshire originally, so New England to New York.
Live free or die, baby.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. And then funny that we both wound up in New York too. It's interesting how that all plays out. And yeah, I ask about purpose, and I would feel as if at this stage, I think I've got a pretty clear cut sense of what my purpose is. But at the same time, like you're saying, absolutely, it may change, right? Is at this stage of life, this is the purpose and this is what I'm doing, but 100% I'm with you. And part of it, that goes with this idea, potential, reaching our potential. If we're doing the work every single day, moving towards that, don't know if I'll ever quite get there. So as you're saying, you don't know if this is exactly your purpose, but it's part of it, right? It's a piece of that puzzle. It's a piece of the journey. So while we're all here on this journey and we're all trying to make the best possible version of ourselves, we pick up some pieces of the puzzle as we go. And I think there's some of us, and I think I'll put you and I in that category for sure, because we're not doing it solo, right? We're not just out there and saying, okay, I'm going to make myself better and that's all I care about. It's, I'm going to make myself better and I'm going to keep working at getting as good as I possibly can. But along the way, I want to share that. I want to help make everybody else around me better as well. And
well, I found that so interesting. Sorry to cut you off, but just going with what you said, I found it so interesting when you said like it helped alleviate your ego or like the negative ego, and in that you found like helping more people. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like your outreach expanded because your inward expanded.
100%. Yeah, and it's
it's a beautiful idea.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly believe that's what we're here for, right? We're each here to become the best version of ourselves. And man, could you imagine what this planet would be if every single one of us made ourselves the absolute best version that we were meant to be? I remain optimistic. I think we can attain that at some point. I talk to a lot of people and they're not quite as optimistic, unfortunately. And I try to play my role to pull them aboard the optimism side of it, I also do have a dose of reality. As John Gordon often talks about, being an optimist doesn't mean you fall into that Pollyanna syndrome and that you only see the good, right? Like you can recognize there's a dose of reality. There's some bad stuff that goes on around us, but we can really focus on that mental aspect of it, of focus on the good, focus on what you're grateful for. The more you give that your energy, the more you're going to see it. Whereas the more you give negativity and pessimism your energy, you're going to see more of that too. So it really winds up being a choice, and I choose to find the optimism and the things that I'm grateful for. It's again part of that journey, right?
Yeah. Amen.
Now, I do.
Yeah, totally. And it's not a denial, like what you said, it's not a denial of the reality of the situation. Right. There might be things that are really tough in the situation going on right there. It's not a denial of that. I think that's where people get delusional in the whole idea of it, is where it's like, yeah, not everything's great. And what do they say? Peaches and rainbows or whatever they say, unicorns and rainbows. And it's like, yeah, no one's saying that, like, stuff happens that like really hurts and like you have to go through and you have to sift through. But it's like at the end of the day, it's like what you're talking about, thoughts they matter. They can affect you chemically. They certainly can. And that affects inflammation. So however you want to look at it, that's fine. But it's at the end of the day, this kind of what I'm like, there are people that are optimists, there are people that are pessimists, and I'm sure everything in between. If you just treat people well, mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like none of that stuff, it's fine. It's same thing. Like whatever side, you vote for, whatever religion you believe in, whatever, team you're on or tribe you're a part of. It's like, great. That's awesome. Like, do that, do you, but like, still treat people well.
Yeah.
Just because someone isn't doesn't mean that they're bad or that they don't deserve love or that they, deserve, everyone deserves kindness,
For sure.
So it's like, I agree. At the end of the day, it's like, cup is half full for sure.
Absolutely.
For me.
No, and that's the thing. We're clearly cut from the same cloth. We could go back and forth on that aspect all day. And I don't want to cut that part of it short because I love that aspect of the message, but it's true. It's what you put your energy into is what you're going to see more of, and there's this aspect you mentioned before, be wise about who you choose to share that stuff with. Right. I think when
not everyone's worthy.
That's absolutely right. And it's interesting. The more we heal, the more we are sensitive to the energy that others put off, right? And really the energy we put off will attract people that put off that same energy. So I think the biggest thing that I try to encourage people to do that inner work first. Don't seek somebody else to do it for you or to help you through it. Because if you haven't done that, the people you're attracting to you are the people that have the same energy you're putting off. So if you haven't raised that level of vibration, you haven't raised that energy, then what you're attracting to you is going to bring you more headaches, more problems. And with that in mind, the aspects of the Wim Hof breathing, the Wim Hof method, I'll say, is the breath work, the cold exposure, and the mindset. Tell us a little bit about each of those, if you don't mind. And do you think of those three, is there one that's more important than the other? If somebody they're not, interested, they're not, they're totally new to this and they're saying, well, I don't know if I can do all three at once. Where do I start?
Yeah. Well, let's start with what they are first, and then we'll go into my opinions on each in that regard.
Sure.
So like you mentioned, the three pillars, they call them pillars of the Wim Hof method specifically are breath work, which is, the 30 to 40 breaths, whether that's, nasal or through the mouth. It's all good, but 30 to 40 breaths, holding the breath on an exhale, alkalizing the blood, allowing the oxygen levels to rise and drop, allowing the CO2 levels to rise and drop. There's the ice bath element or cold immersion element of it, which is a nervous system trainer, but also, helps with a lot of inflammation. And it also helps, just a lot of like hormonal resetting, maybe resetting is not the right word, maybe optimization, hormonal optimization, that kind of thing, how our body utilizes our functions. And what you were talking about before, the mindset, I've heard this, the third pillar, mindset, I've heard it also be described as commitment. Like that's one of the things that they're starting to do now is emphasize more commitment. But I think they both go hand in hand. I think if it's a practice that you want to incorporate into your life, you're going to be committed to it. You can't just do it once and then like, hey, I got everything. Yeah, I'll just give you an example. And this is kind of a cool thing about the breath work. So when you do the breath work, and you alkalize the blood. This also goes hand in hand with the ice, but just for the breath work and specifically, when you look at blood, you measure inflammation with cytokines. They're an inflammatory protein within the blood. There are other ways to measure it, but that's one of the main ways. Well, when you do the breath work, they noticed in the Radboud study where women injected themselves with the dead strand of E. coli to prove that you can optimize your body's immune system so you wouldn't feel any of the effects. He and the volunteers did this kind of breath work. And they didn't experience anything. See, I rambled myself into oblivion. What was I was going on inflammation. I had a point, and then I had to go off on a tangent.
I love that, though. You'll pull it back.
The Radboud Institute, the study. Anyway, so anyway, whatever happened in the study, they saw that when the participants injected themselves with the dead strand of E. coli, because they were doing this kind of breath work which alkalizes the blood, which lessens carbon dioxide, which allows the cell in the core of the cell itself to optimize more with remembered. Going, building mitochondrial levels, like we were talking about before, building adenosine triphosphate levels, that kind of thing. They saw that the participants, they didn't experience any of the symptoms. And when you get injected with the dead strand of E. coli or any kind of, bacteria pathogen, you experience symptoms. You'll get fever, you'll get nausea, your heart rate will go up. A whole slew of effects. Like you feel like you have the cold. That didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So they noticed within the cell themselves, this is where I was talking before about the cytokine production. When you get injected with something or you get sick, your cytokine production it increases. And that's when the immune system is called upon. You have senses on the cell itself that will feel a damaged cell or something's within it. They'll call on the immune system will come and you'll be flooded with, different hormones that will treat it and everything like that. And that's when you feel lousy, is when your immune system is in overgear. Well, they noticed with doing the breath work, that they didn't experience the symptoms. And then they checked the cytokine production, and they saw that while doing the breath work, the cytokine productions, the inflammation itself on a cellular level was about half of what it normally would be for people that didn't participate in the breath work. And they were like, okay, that's a little odd. Let's look at it a little further. And they looked at it further, and they saw that, within the cell itself, there were these processes that were happening that optimized the cell in the face of a pathogen or a bacteria, or in this case, E. coli. And the participants didn't experience anything. So they looked more at the cytokine production, and they saw that from just doing one session of breath work, that cytokine production was limited for about half, and that lasted, it diminished, but it lasted for about 6 days. So you just think, right, if you do this even twice a week, what that is actually doing internally to your inflammation level within the blood. It's pretty powerful, but that's what they saw is that with the cytokine production specifically, that it was all down, that everything was down. So inflammation was down. On top of that, the system was flooded with white blood cells, which help fight disease, inflammation, pathogens, that kind of thing. Leukocytosis is the terminology that's used. It's when your body's flooded with white blood cells. But they saw that while inflammation was down, white blood cells were up. So you're getting this like double benefit just from the breath work. So the breath work is crazy powerful. And then, the commitment aspect, the third aspect, or the ice. We talked about commitment. The ice, it works the systems incredibly. It works the nervous system because you're getting into a hormesis, which is a purposeful stress. You'll hear that term a lot everywhere. Yep. Hormesis. It's a short-term stress, which equals long-term gain. So like going to the gym is a form of hormesis. Doing breath work, intense breath work, an ice bath, sauna work, yoga, like those are short-term stresses, which equal long-term strength. The cold specifically is a great trainer for that, because when you get into the cold, everything in your body's like, get out of this. This is not good. Get out. But when you are able to breathe through that, what you're training your system is, because you are able to breathe calmly, the nervous system is connected to the breath. The calmer that you breathe, the calmer your system is. So even though you're in a stressed environment with the ice around you, because you're breathing nice and calmly, you're telling your system that what we're experiencing isn't that bad, so you don't have to react as much. So the cold is training your nervous system in that regard. It's also training you physically. It's getting rid of a lot of inflammation. It's building cold shock proteins. It's helping the body recover. It's raising it will spike your adrenaline level, bring it back down, or release the happy hormones. You'll be able to calm in the cold. And what that ultimately equals is your body's ability, it's called the stress response, to deal better with external stresses that we don't control. So a hormesis, you willingly go into that ice bath. You willingly go into a workout. It's a willing, and that's very important in terms of mindset too, which is the first pillar. That willingness to go into it is really, really important for the overall outcome of it. Or the effect of it, I should say. So the willingness to go into that and then control your body within, it raises your stress response, so that when you face stress that wasn't controlled, let's say, or wasn't like planned upon, your body is already more adaptive. It's way more optimal to deal with that stress than it was before. So you're literally raising your base level of the stress response mechanism. You're making it harder for things to stress you out now. So it works on a whole. You add your circulatory system into that, where your capillaries and your blood vessels, they close and then open up, and then close and then open up. It's another form of think of your muscle. You stress, like when you're working out, then you don't, then you stress when you're working out, it gets stronger. Similarly, the pumps on your cells themselves, which pump blood everywhere, you know, they get stronger because they're closed and then they're open, and then they're closed and then they're open. It's like a workout. So your circulatory system gets a workout. So you're getting all these benefits just from, you know, the ice. So you have a combo of the breath work, the cold, and the mindset. You have a tripod of benefit. In terms of what I think is the most important, I think the most doable and probably maybe the best gateway in is probably the breath. You know, I do think the cold. Don't get me wrong. I you know, to categorize one more important than the other. So they're all really important. But sometimes the cold can deter people. You know what I mean? Sometimes the cold itself can be that like barrier that's like, nah, I'm good. And then like the whole thing is a wash. But I feel with the breath, you know, what you're doing down to a cellular level is really powerful, and you feel that. But I also feel right now too, it's such a stress relief. And I think that's so needed right now. And to understand that the only thing you need in order to adjust your frequency, in order to change your state, is your breath, is really important. And I feel like that's the doorway in, that's the Pandora's box in, that will lead people to the cold too, being like, oh, well, this is cool. I guess I want to try this. You know what I mean? But they're all important. And if you can do them all, by all means, you know, even if it's just the shower, turn the shower cold, catch your breath in there, elongate the exhales, focus on the exhales, smooth the breathing, that kind of thing, then do that. But if for nothing else, it's nice to take even just 5 minutes and do 1 or 2 rounds, you know, that of breathing that is on your time. I think there's something really powerful about that, just like giving yourself time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I would, my take anyway, and I think based on what you just said, you'd probably agree with this, especially where you call the mindset commitment now. And I love that. I think mindset does open up a little bit more. We can go a little deeper with the concept of mindset over commitment. But for those 3 pillars of this method, that makes a lot of sense. So maybe in that sense, let's make the commitment first. So we're committed to doing something. We're going to start somewhere. And then we transition it from the commitment into the breath, because the reality is, you know, with the cold, and correct me if I'm wrong and you disagree, the cold, there's actually a case to be made that it can be harmful if you perceive it to be harmful and you don't know how to allow your body to react. So if you learn the benefits that could come from it, you learn how to do the breath work first, do that and change your physiology through the breath, and then learn as you teach, which I'm going to make sure my producer puts this into today's podcast. He and I actually discussed this previously, and I botched it. I think I was overthinking it.
Yeah.
And it was your line of, don't let it take your exhale. And I think in my mind, I was thinking, don't let it take your breath away. Don't let it take your inhale. I was like, no, not your inhale. It doesn't make sense. Don't let it take your exhale, right? So what a difference that made for me. I was already doing the breath work. I was already doing the cold showers prior to our workshop together. But when I got into that bucket of ice water and you taught us, as you get in on your exhale, it was an absolute game changer for me. I mean, even prior to that, I had already seen some of the benefits that came from just being in the cold and in the cold shower, but getting into it on the exhale was definitively a game changer. So yeah, I'm with you. Just getting people to start somewhere is absolutely brilliant. And again, I think if we go in that order of the commitment to the breath work, to the cold exposure, I think that's a great introduction for people. And you keep talking about inflammation. I think that's something that we can't stress enough, because really, 80% of disease starts as inflammation. And we've got, in America alone, 88% of Americans have metabolic syndrome, full of inflammation. So, I mean, man, even if we don't go, I tend to go down the nutritional end, the sleep end, all these other facets. Yeah. If we want some almost, absolutely right, they all play their role, right? But if we want some almost instant response, we do the breath work in the cold. We can measure that, as you said, and we can see that inflammation come down. People can start to get healthier right in this very moment if they start some breath work. And man, that's the kind of stuff that I want to introduce people to, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really powerful to know that it's right under your nose. You know,
Amen.
like, you know, I'm sure most listeners have, at least 2 minutes to alter the state. It's right under the nose. It's like, the more that I learned about it, it made more sense why maybe this is kind of like full circle back in the day when I was 17 years old, and my instructors in yoga class were talking about prana and life force, and and then you go to martial arts and they talk about chi and everything. It's like, until you fully kind of recognize the power of the breath, it's like that's what they're talking about. That is the life force that's within all of us, and it's right under your nose. It's right under our nose, and it's like that thing that all of the ancients would talk about in terms of bring the woo-woo to reality, which it's what brings the spirit to the physical. It's the breath. It's what brings, if you're religious, heaven to earth. It's what brings, the non-physical to that. It's right under our nose, and it dramatically alters our state when you're able to tap into it. And it's like, okay, well, awesome. Let's teach people different techniques to do that, because it's the game changer. It's the number one game changer that we have control over.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so simple. I mean, the interesting thing about that, right, is I actually just recently finished James Nestor's book, Breath. And I mean, he goes over the complications that come from this constant, short, shallow breath that we're taking so many of. If we just learn to slow it down and make it deeper, if we can learn to breathe through our nose, the benefits that we get from that, which actually brings me to one of the other things I wanted to make sure we go over. You have an awesome video out about the breath technique, the 3 cycles of breath and then holding your breath for the 5 seconds to be able to get the sinuses to stimulate the nitric oxide. If you can give a little more detail than I just did there about how to do it, maybe even demonstrate a round of it, and get into the benefits that we get physiologically.
Yeah, so
from
that's a
getting
technique
that
from Patrick McKweon. It started at the Butico Clinic and then Oxygen Advantage. Patrick McKweon is brilliant and should be absolutely followed for breath work, breath technique. He's even, you mentioned XPT before, which I'm, a student of and teacher of as well. Patrick's on the board for that, as like one of their head breath guys. And then PJ, who is the actual breath teacher, like learned under him and everything. Patrick is fucking brilliant. So this technique came from him, and what they saw with nitric oxide is just the benefit of it. It's a vasodilator, which means the capillaries and the blood vessels, they open up. You can feel it in your nose as well. It builds in the mucous membrane of the nasal cavity. So, as you inhale that, everything opens up so you can feel more. You're able to feel like the difference of breath more, which is a mindfulness meditation on feeling in and of itself. NO2 nitric oxide, not NO2, NO nitric oxide. It's antimicrobial. It cleans the air. It's antifungal. It helps. One of the benefits too is it helps distribute oxygen through the lungs evenly. And this information comes from Patrick and the people at the Butico Clinic too. The majority of oxygen, or a vast amount of oxygen in our lungs, are at the bottom, because the blood is at the bottom. So, you want to breathe deeply and able to get deep into the diaphragm and allow that expansion down there, because that's where the most oxygen exchange will take place. But, if not, nitric oxide helps distribute it through the lungs very evenly. So it's really powerful. They're also using it too to do COVID relief, for long COVID. It's part of training and let's say protocol probably isn't the best word, because there's not necessarily, there are like different techniques that people are experimenting with to see what's working. And one of the ones that's working has nitric oxide in it as well. So it's really powerful. But yeah, this is what we'll do. You're going to demonstrate. I'll coach, and we'll do a couple rounds. But it's super simple. All this stuff is on the Butico website, and also Oxygen Advantage website. One of the things that I really like about Patrick is he gives everything away. And similarly to Wim, they want to empower people and just strengthen people. And similarly too, they both came from their own ailments, let's say, for lack of a stronger word, to these techniques and healed themselves and helped treat themselves. So this is where it comes from, so just nasal breathe right now, nice and easy as you normally would, in through your nose and out through your nose. Allow the breath to go into the diaphragm down here, so you expand in all directions. When you inhale, you want to feel like you're a balloon with ribs on it, so you expand everywhere, right? And then on the exhale, just nice and easy out of the nose. And again, inhale fully in through the nose. Exhale gently out of the nose. Hold the breath at the bottom. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the nose. And 2 breaths again. Inhale through the nose into the diaphragm, full expansion. Exhale out of the nose, nice and easy. Excellent. 1 more breath. Inhale, expand. Exhale, release. Hold the breath at the bottom. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale and exhale. Very nice. We'll do 1 more. 2 breaths. Fully inhale. And you can start to feel it too. You're probably feeling your nose open up a little more. And exhale. And you can tell the difference in temperature. Inhalation, it's a little cooler. Exhalation, it's a little warmer. Exhale. Hold the breath at the bottom. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. And exhale. And just allow yourself for a moment just to tune into the breath, and you'll feel the changes within. It helps clear rhinitis. It's good for allergies.
You just answered the question. So there's so many people I talk to that, I'll have them in my massage room, which you may have noticed my background changed. I told you at the beginning, I share my office with a physical therapist, and his last patient he was in the other room with, and his next one he's heading into the office we were just sharing. So I had to try to move real quick. So now I'm in my treatment room, and I'll have clients on the table as massage therapists, and I really try to get them to get the breath work in. I'm a firm believer in the techniques that we learned as licensed massage therapists, and that I can get somebody's body to respond. But let's be honest, the reality is, if we can get them to consciously stimulate their parasympathetic nervous system through the breath work, the techniques that I'm using are going to be so much more impactful. And, oftentimes I'll have people come in that they're dealing with allergies, they're just congested, they're having difficulty breathing through their nose. And I try to get them to do some of that. And, I really just want to be able to send them to you and get you to teach them those techniques and get them to be able to, because now I want this from your perspective, but that technique that you just had me do for somebody who's clogged in their nose, but as they often say, there's nothing in there. It's just, it feels swollen. If we can get that nitric oxide to be produced, is that going to clear those passages and allow them to breathe better nasally?
To say you'll cure it or to say you'll clear it all, that'd be, false advertising. But just that's like one of the things I love about this is like the mechanism of itself of our reaction to nitric oxide or what it produces. Like that's what we can go on, and then you can have anecdotal evidence afterward. People are like, yeah, well, that kind of thing. But just the building of nitric oxide, period, is it's a vasodilator, so it's going to open up those capillaries and those blood vessels within. It's going to help clear what is clogged and open that up more. Now, like it was some people require, more treatment, or some people require more work to open up the actual, the muscles themselves to open up more. And like they have those devices now that you can put up your nose and they help keep the nose open, kind of like Breathe Right, but from within. There are a bunch of different things that will certainly help with overall functional nasal breathing for sure. But nitric oxide, it's something to try for sure. I mean, it's good for you. It's good for the incoming air. It helps clean it more so. It helps open things up. So it can definitely help.
Absolutely. Yeah. After reading the book Breath, that's one of the things James talked about too, was, the way he worded it is nasal breathing begets more nasal breathing, mouth breathing begets more mouth breathing. So, we're breathing through our mouth, we're pulling in all these pathogens with no way of neutralizing it, no way of filtering it. And we're increasing our risk of getting sick. We breathe through that nose, we're able to filter it out. And as you're saying, we're able to build that nitric oxide up as well. So some definite tools that we can get there.
I think it's one of the best books on breath ever. My buddy Chuck he's buddies with James. They actually just did a retreat together. But he was talking to me when we were out training for OA together, like about the book and James and everything. And it helped him with some of the studies, and was one of James's first breath coach and everything. But to me, that's Chuck, yeah.
Is it last name McGee?
Yeah,
is that right?
Chuck's
yeah, okay, yeah. He referenced him in the book a lot.
Yeah, it's profound, man. It's profound. When he was writing it too, or when he was telling me about it, like back then, he's like, "This is it. This is it's a great book. It's awesome." And sure enough, it's like one of the best out there on it. And yeah. I highly recommend.
Absolutely. Now I'm curious. I've been for about 2 months now, I think I would estimate. I had been introduced to this previously, but hadn't decided to start it until reading that book. I started mouth taping at night, and I was curious going into it. Honestly, with my meditation, I breathe exclusively through my nose, doing the diaphragmatic breathing and really getting my body to be comfortable with it. And I've noticed I don't get sick nearly as often. I've reaped so many benefits from it that I said, I'm curious. Let's see if I tape my mouth, am I going to keep it on at night, or am I going to wake up having ripped it off? And, if I do keep it on, am I going to wake up with less dry mouth? Is my mouth dry because I'm keeping my mouth open, or just because, as we know, sleep is a lot of work?
So let me ask you this. Did you notice did you notice at first, like my mouth is dry when I wake up, or like you'd have drool on the pillow like that? Those are indicators of, breathing with your mouth open at night. Did you notice those first, or were you like, oh, I'm just going to try and tape it shut and see?
Yeah, I was going to test it to see, knowing that I breathe through my nose, with the exception of when I'm talking throughout the and or eating and drinking throughout the day, my mouth is shut and I'm breathing through my nose. So I felt pretty confident that with the tape, I would be okay. But yeah, I would say I wake up with dry mouth occasionally, but that's what I was saying is we know that sleep in and of itself it's a taxing job, if you will. We are getting dehydrated through sleep. So when we wake up, it's vital to drink as much water as we can anyway. I usually recommend 16 to 32 ounces. So interestingly, yeah, even with the mouth tape, I will wake up still with a semi-dry mouth. But there definitely, if I go back in history, there was definitively a time that I was more of a mouth breather, and I would wake up, I would snore more. My wife would tell me, all those types of things. Not so much the drool that I can recall, but for sure dry mouth and
the drool was my indicator.
I don't deal with that anymore at all.
I'm like, why are all these marks on my pillow, and like peroxide marks and stuff?
Too funny. Well, I tell you, let's think. There's a couple other questions I know I had written down. I went, oh, here it is. So you've mentioned mitochondria a couple of times. I've heard this from a couple of different places. I think there was a study that was referenced in Cell magazine that they talked about it. But from your perspective, cold exposure's impact on mitophagy.
Well, the cold will build brown fat as well. And the reason why the brown fat is brown is there's more mitochondria there. Yeah. That's the only difference. So yeah, I mean the cold itself will affect the cell where it will produce and build not just more but stronger mitochondria as well. So yeah, I mean that just from exposure. Now you add in the other stuff to it, the extended mindset training with the exposure going into it more calmly, build that kind of thing. They all affect, but just the cold itself, you're absolutely going to build more mitochondria within the cell. You're absolutely going to activate that system more. You're going to build more cold shock proteins. But yeah, I mean, that's our powerhouse. The mitochondria is our powerhouse within the cell. So the stronger that is, the stronger the cell, the stronger,
Absolutely.
we operate. So it's right there too, right? Like, changing the dial, going cold.
Absolutely. It gets easier and easier. As Wim talks about in the book, 10 days is all it takes. And man, you can start out, you take your normal hot shower, warm shower, what have you, and at the end of it for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever the window of time that you're willing to go in, and preferably not fight through, preferably just breathe through and give into, right? But boy, in just 10 days now, I've been doing it. I don't think I've missed a day of getting deliberately cold since even well before our workshop together, but definitively since then. I mean, it's a daily occurrence, and I love it. I don't have any intentions of stopping.
Sure. Yeah, man, it's like it's recovery, and like you were saying, as much as possible, you don't want to fight it. And that's not to say when you get in, you're not like, right? Like, the saying, don't let it take your exhales. So it was awesome. Someone that came to a retreat of mine, she came to Jacqueline, but Jack, she came to a workshop and then came up to our house for a 2-day retreat up here. And she made a t-shirt for me that says, don't let it take your exhales. I wish it was right here. I would pop it out. But the reason for that is because when you get into a stressed environment or when you get scared, it takes your exhale away. It takes your breath away when you're like, the reason why you're in that state is your nervous system is going crazy. Well, the thing that we can control is our breath that alters our nervous system state. So when you get into the cold, it's not that like, what you're talking about, you're going to fight that, like, oh, this isn't affecting me at all. Like, it's like, you don't want that at all. You want it to affect you and be like, okay, this is cold. What can I control? I can control my breath. And you'll notice within a couple breaths of just extending that exhale, your body will calm. The breath, the exhale specifically, is connected to the nervous system. It's connected to our vagus nerve. It's connected to your parasympathetic nervous system. It's the exhale. So the more that you can exhale in a time of stress, the more you're training your body to deal much better with stress. You're talking about the mitochondria before in the ice itself too. Like, when you're working out, I'm sure you see this with training or whatever, and coming in and doing therapy, like people's bodies are broken down. They're like torn and stuff like that. And it's, a big part of it is like the degradation of the cell and the mitochondria. And it's like, you can rebuild those, you can strengthen those. So then it helps strengthen the recovery. And what you're talking about before, inflammation, 80% of disease and, whatever, it's chronic inflammation at the back burner, or at the forefront rather. It's like you can mitigate that. You can tap into that, so you build that mitochondrial strength. So then you're building that muscle repair. You're building your body's ability to get back to homeostasis more quickly. So when you get into the cold, it's not that it doesn't affect you. Of course, it's fucking cold. Of course, it's going to affect you. You know what I'm saying? We're not trying to fight the cold. What we are trying to do is activate our through the breath. So it's not that it doesn't affect you when it hits you. It's how quickly can you recover that breath. We're working on that recovery time. We're working on that stress response. So you have an action that happens, i.e. the cold hits you. How quickly can you gather that breath and calm that system? This is what we're working with, this gap right here. It's not how long you can stay in there. No, it's how quickly you can recover while you're in there, so that when you're met with an external stress that you don't willingly go into, your body recovers that much more quickly because it's trained. It's already down to a cellular level, it's already adjusted to it. So I rambled. Mitochondria, stress. Good stuff.
No, I love that though. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something else. You said that at the workshop, and that changed how I did my showers too, because it wasn't just, okay, let me do it for 90 seconds or 3 minutes or whatever the window of time that people say, oh, you have to do that for. It was, oh, you know what? For a little while, rather than doing it for as long as I can, I'm going to do it for how quickly can I recover my breath. Crank that bugger as cold as I can. It's taking my breath away. It's hitting me and I'm breathing through it. And you get it down to 15 to 20 seconds of, it just shocked me a second ago. And now I'm breathing normally under here because of the work at it. That was one of my favorite things. And, doing that for a little while made it a lot easier too, from a time perspective. I didn't have to stay in there for an extra 3 or more minutes. it was in those cases, I mean, it was under 30 seconds that I was able to recover my breath. And, sure, I was still cold, but I was breathing under control, so it was a wonderful tool. So yeah, I could definitely go on and on about this all day because I know how much we both do it, love it, live it, and want other people to get it. But to be able to have people walk away from this today and go do something, is it as simple as the 3 pillars of Wim Hof that you would say, these are my top 3, get started here, go commit, go do the breath work and go get cold? Or is there 3 other things? What are the top 3 things that you would send people away from this today with?
First and foremost, as much as you possibly can, without sacrificing what it is that you're doing, breathe out of your nose. Breathe in and out of your nose. As much as you possibly can, breathe in and out of your nose. Now, the other thing that we see a lot of, disruption in is the breathing pattern. They call it inverse breathing pattern. Patrick will preach about this too, but you'll see proper breathing technique. You see, this is your diaphragm. You can dig under your ribs all the way around, and that's your diaphragm, right? So when you breathe, you want that expansion here. So when you inhale, like this is my balloon with ribs on it. So when you inhale, you expand. As you exhale, that's when the belly button goes towards the spine and you deflate. What inverse breathing is, and it's incorrect, is when you inhale, the belly goes in and this pops up, the chest. A lot of people do that. It starts around like middle school when boys kind of bow up like this and girls have to suck in their belly and stuff. It creates this inverse breathing pattern. And what that'll do is it'll put you into a sympathetic state, which is inflammation. It'll put you into more of a stressed state. So the 2 things, as much as you possibly can, breathe in and out of the nose, and with the breath, breathe fully into the diaphragm. So the diaphragm expands and then the chest expands. So the breath is like that. It's a wave. Even back here, expand out and back. And then once you get that, then the breath nice and calmly in and out of the nose, nice and slowly. Patrick has a saying that I absolutely love. He says, low and slow. Breathe low into the diaphragm slowly while remaining in control of the breath and also getting a full breath. But nice and low, nice and slow. So those would be the 2 things that I would say. And just from, a meditative, for people that don't meditate or have a breath practice or anything, just take 5 minutes. Like start slow, start really slow. This isn't something that is supposed to overwhelm or it's supposed to add stress. The opposite, So if it is something that people want to integrate in their first starting out, just take 5 minutes and just, breathe in and out of your nose consciously with nice full breaths on the inhalation and on the exhalation, and just start there. And then if you want to get into other modalities or something intrigues you, like the Wim Hof Method or Oxygen Advantage or XPT stuff specifically, I mean, there's a whole slew of teachers and different techniques and things like that. Then branch off and do it. But, just start nice and slowly. Just have it be something that can be repeatable on, at least a few times a week basis.
Oh, it's fantastic. And unfortunately, I know you and I both could do this for another hour plus easy, but I just got the low battery mode on my phone. So I think we're getting a warning that we should start to wrap up. So that's it, right? So I do have another question or 2 for you. But before we get to that, I'll just say to the listeners out there, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, follow along, leave a review, rate it if you're on Spotify. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, share, all that good stuff. If you have any questions for Michael, please let me know. Drop comments in there, and I'll be sure to be in touch with him. And odds are we'll have him back on because, as I said, we could easily do this for another hour, no problem. So with all that said, Michael, where can people follow you, and how can they get a hold of you to get to some of your workshops and come witness this stuff firsthand and experience it?
Yeah. Well, one, thank you. I appreciate the exposure and the love. So, yeah. So if you want to reach out to me, just personally, that kind of thing, my website is the best way to do that. michaelchristoforo.co. On there, it has all the workshops and events and, the private Wim Hof workshops and the private breath sessions that you can, cater yourself, that kind of thing, where we come. All of the retreat information that we do is on there. Everything's on there. It's a way to get a hold of me to work, whether it's in groups or one-on-one, that kind of thing. I am on Instagram. I begrudgingly, I'm learning how to do the social media. So Instagram is at M Christoforo. So give me a shout out there. I do check it. Yeah, that's really it. So on the site itself, you can email or reach out through there, and then Instagram too. Give a holler.
Brilliant. Well, I think this went better than expected. Not that I expected anything less than great, but it was fantastic. It was great catching up. And so the listeners, be sure, stick around, follow. We're going to be sure to bring you more good stuff, and we will be in touch. So God bless all. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll be in touch soon. Have a great day.